Namaste. In 1892, a young monk, unknown then, who went by the name Swami Satchidananda or Swami Vivekananda, sat upon the last bit of Indian rock at Kanyakumari and meditated. He came to the realization there that he was meant to dedicate his life to the service of the poor, to raising the masses, to lifting them out of the abysmal conditions that they lived in. This realization was not something sudden. He had observed them during the course of his travels from east to west, north to south. And he also felt that if a young band of men, sannyasins who had renounced the world, were to go from village to village, educating the poor, then great good would come out of it. But how was he to achieve this? He was a sannyasin, penniless, and he decided that he would go to America, to the West, to raise funds. The story of how he actually went to America is one for another day, but needless to say, it was not easy. And finally the funds were raised and he reached America, where there was another set of trials that faced him. He'd reached too early. When he actually went to the Parliament of Religions, he lost his way. Later on, as he lectured his way across America, a lecture bureau cheated him of the money that it was to pay him. Missionaries and others from Calcutta, Pradeep Majumdar, they threw calumny at him. They spread rumors about him. And what worried him was that if his mother were to hear this, what her feelings would be. Apart from that, his funds were running out, and he faced a lot of trouble, especially to his health, in raising the money for his work. In 1897, 125 years ago, he returned from America to India. And this year is important because it wove together the threads, not only of the vision that he had and the funds that he raised, but the work that he was about to do. In 1897, he set about looking for a piece of land on which to build a mutt. There were two aims in this. One was, of course, to forge his brother disciples and he and find a home for themselves from where they could do the work. And the second was to find a permanent home for Thakur, for the relics of his mortal body that were called Shriji. And towards this end, land was purchased at a village called Belur in 1897, and possession was finally theirs the next year. In February of 1898, possession of the land at Belur came to the Ramakrishna order. And on 27th February, there occurred an event of great signification. To understand this, we have to go back to the time when Sri Ramakrishna passed away and his household disciples withdrew one by one the support that they had given until then financially. And the young men, his band of disciples who wanted to take the vows of renunciation, were left to fend for themselves. They couldn't afford a grand house, so they found one that had the cheapest rent, what was called the Baranagor Mutt, which was said to be haunted, and parts of it were crumbling. In the years that followed, when they lived there, they faced many difficulties, and it was Surendranath Mitra who came and helped them, offering them money at a later stage. What preoccupied all of them greatly were the remains, the relics of Sri Ramakrishna, which were placed in an urn called Shriji. And they worshipped the Master and made arrangements for this worship wholeheartedly. When Swami Vivekananda came back and the land for Belur was bought, on 27th February 1898, he placed this urn called Shriji on his shoulder after worshipping it. And then he walked the distance from Neelambar Mukherjee's house, where the mutt was functioning at that time, to the newly bought land, where then the land was consecrated and worship offered to Shriji. Swamiji said, Sri Ramakrishna said to me, wherever you will take me on your shoulders, there I will go and stay, be it under a tree or in a hut. It is therefore that I am myself carrying him on my shoulders to the new mutt grounds. He also said then, a 12 years anxiety is off my head. The money for this came from two women, Henrietta Muller, who gave about 40,000 rupees towards purchase of the land, and Sarah Bull, an American woman, who gave a lakh of rupees and more towards construction of the mutt. Apart from this, Josephine McLeod also helped financially. It's interesting that it was women who gave the initial sums of money towards building the mutt, because the Swamiji was greatly impressed by women in America. He saw what education had done for them, and he wanted, apart from raising the masses, to also do something for the young girls of India. Towards this end, Sister Nivedita's school was set up, and it was his dearest wish to start a mutt for women, for sadhvis and sannyasinis. As he put it, the soul has no sex, no caste, no imperfection. And if there were to be a mutt for men, then there was to be a mutt for women as well. Particularly inspiring was the fact that Sarah Bull gave a donation of money for a mutt for the women of the household, the mothers of all the monks who had renounced the world, a place where these mothers could be looked after. The Sharda Mutt actually came into being much later, after Swamiji had left this earth, but its seeds were sowed in that year, 1897. The mutt was meant for those young men who joined the order, the Ramakrishna order of sannyasis, and the mission was meant for the work that they would do in this world of education, of medical help, of relief, and of general succor to the poor. For both of these, the motto that Swami Vivekananda chose was Atmano Mokshartham Jagat Hitaya Cha. And the two parts of this, liberation for the self and welfare of all beings on earth, in a way brought together the vision that he saw at Kanyakumari. While it's a motto for the order, it's also something for all of us to live by. I'm sure each one of us has visited the Ramakrishna mission at one of its many centers, somewhere at least once. And I think we take their presence for granted. But we mustn't forget that it was really Swamiji's hardships in America that led to this and led to the setting up of the many different centers of the Ramakrishna mission. He had laid the seeds in 1897 with the Ramakrishna Mission Association, which later then was formalized into the Mutt and the Mission. Today, the realization that he had at Kanyakumari has resulted in 14 hospitals, 100 dispensaries, 1 university, 7 colleges, 500 schools, polytechnics, vocational training centers, hostels, orphanages, relief and rehabilitation works during times of natural disasters, institutes of agriculture, rural training centers, work that helps women and youngsters, and of course the spread of the Ramakrishna movement worldwide. Typical of Swamiji, when there was a plague in Calcutta in 1898, he stood ready to give up all those just purchased lands and the properties on them to sell them to raise money for the plague. Thankfully for us, that was not necessary. And today, as Swami said of Belur, the blazing light of universal harmony that will emanate from here will flood the whole world.